live. This is Law Call.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for Law Call tonight. I'm attorney Chris Young with the law firm of Perry & Young, and tonight we're talking about fighting the insurance companies. There's a lot of times you get in an auto accident or you're doing something that involves the insurance company where you feel like they should owe you money, and for whatever reason, they're just not paying you what you think that you deserve. So tonight's show is all about fighting the insurance company. If you got a question, give us a call, 850-392-1544, or you can always email us your questions at lawcall@wmbb.com. Tonight, I'm joined by one of my closest friends, and actually happens to be my law partner too, Les McFadder. And Les, get your boxing gloves on, buddy. We're going to be fighting the insurance company, right, brother?
Yeah, something we do on a daily basis, 24/7 around here. Yeah.
And so, you know, Les, you said it best. We do it 24/7.
Right.
I mean, that's all that we do as a firm. And so we're very equipped. But, you know, a lot of things are happening in our legislature right now. It has already happened that we need to talk a lot about tonight to make sure all of our viewers understand that some of the rights that you had a few months ago are no longer there. Statute of limitations have changed. How you calculate damages in a lawsuit have changed.
Right.
And a lot of these things they're basically unbiased. They affect everybody, no matter who you are, no matter what race you are, social class that you're in,
right.
Financial status. It affects everybody in the state of Florida. So we need to talk about that. And so let's just jump right into it. And number one is, you know, recently our state legislature has passed changes that some are calling a tort reform bill,
right? You
know, reforming how lawsuits are filed and who can file a lawsuit and how much you can collect. But, you know, part of that change in the legislature was statute of limitations.
That's right.
So let's jump into that.
Yeah, so the statute of limitations, typically when we're talking about an injury case, you're typically dealing with a negligence claim. And the statute of limitations used to be 4 years in the state of Florida. That is the amount of time you have from the date the incident happens until you have to file the lawsuit. Now, typically we're dealing with the insurance companies, ideally almost immediately. I mean, so if you're involved in a wreck, if you have any questions, it's best not to try to go it along. It's best to talk with an attorney immediately, as soon as possible, so that we can start the process of building the claim. But if, you know, sometimes we settle claims. Most of the times we can settle claims. Right. If we can get a good negotiation going, rapport, we can build the case, the client gets their treatment. But sometimes settlement negotiations break down. Sometimes we have, I don't know, Cat 5 hurricanes that stall our court system for a year and a half, followed by a pandemic that stalls our court system for another year and a half, that pushes things out a little bit longer. It used to be you had 4 years, now you have 2. So they've cut the amount of time to file a lawsuit in half.
Right. And like you said, there's things sometimes out of our control.
Right.
You know, and we've all, you know, what was it, 2018, October 2018? So we're almost 5 years since Hurricane Michael. And, you know, going through that process, we still know of individuals who still have not resolved their hurricane claims yet.
That's right.
And, you know, we're resolving those. We're still resolving some for some individuals.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's very, you know, we call it unfair. You can call it what you want to, but there's definitely a big adjustment in what the state of Florida has signed off on, and the changes that are coming forth and already been implemented. Yeah,
and you know, the statute of limitations is really just the beginning with this tort reform legislation. I mean, cutting the amount of time you have to file a claim in half. Mm-hmm. Now there are limitations on the types of damages that can be presented. Sure. You know, whether you are allowed to get Medicare or Medicaid. There's talks about limiting the future medical expenses you can claim to just what Medicare or Medicaid might reimburse, even though you may not have those types of programs.
Well, let's jump into that.
Yeah.
Let's just dumb it down. I mean,
yeah.
Let's just say that you have a $10 million life care plan and go for there.
Yeah. So you're involved. You or a loved one's involved in a catastrophic accident. You meet with your lawyers meet with your team of doctors, and we're talking about a catastrophic injury, somebody with a traumatic brain injury, somebody that probably is never going to work again, maybe somebody that will never be able to take care of themselves, is going to need, you know, attendant care for the rest of their life. We put together these life care plans that take all that sort of thing into account, you know, because you want to be able to capture every element of damage that there is if you're involved in a wreck and it's not your fault. And so for the more catastrophic injuries, we deal with life care plans, which take into account all the things you think about. How am I going to pay for this? What if I need to have modifications made to my home? What if, how long, if this wheelchair breaks in 10 years, what if I need a new one? I mean, anything you can think of that goes into calculating damages, it goes into that. Well, now they're talking about, we're not going to let you claim what the actual cost of that is going to be. We're going to limit that cost to what Medicare or Medicaid might reimburse.
Right.
Well, if you're on Medicare or Medicaid, great, because you get care. But if you ever get those explanations of benefits in the mail, you look and you say, well, my doctor billed, $1,000 for this MRI, but Medicare paid $150.
Right.
So you may need that $1,000 MRI in the future, but you're only going to get $150 for it because that's what Medicare or Medicaid pays.
And they passed this. They signed off on it.
And that has been passed, right? So you're really talking about a situation where people can be left in a lurch, and it's just like property reform insurance that passed in January, and everybody said, oh, the rates are going to come down. The rates are going to come down.
I haven't seen that yet.
My rates went up 30%. The same type of thing. The tort reform. Oh, it's going to lower insurance rates. It's going to lower insurance rates. I don't know about you. Everything has gone up for me.
Yes. Well, Les, we talk about life care plans, and that's something that is near and dear to me because my dad was paralyzed when I was 13 years old. And, if we had a life care plan for him at that point, because my parents never pursued any type of claim, but you take things for granted. And you talked about a wheelchair breaking down in 10 years. What about if a wheelchair breaks down in 2 years?
Right.
What happens if you gain weight because you're paralyzed and you have to have a larger wheelchair, or maybe the tires are worn out, or maybe the tubes are bad. And you just talk about the wheelchair component, and then you talk about the modifications to the house and having somebody come in and do things for you that you really take for granted, even using the restroom with dignity. And then you come up with a life care plan of something that says, hey, look, in present dollar values, this is what it's going to cost to take care of Chris's dad. And then our legislature has come forward and says, well, we understand that, but we're going to pay on the Medicaid rate.
Right. It's basically, I don't want to ruffle too many feathers, but basically it was an insurance company wish list that they served up on a silver platter to the industry.
So the show tonight is fighting the insurance company, and so it's it makes our job a lot more challenging to fight the insurance company when you kind of come in and you're fighting an uphill battle already. And so we're accustomed to that.
Sure.
We probably file as many or more lawsuits on behalf of our clients than anybody does in our area probably, and we do that because if the insurance company doesn't give us a fair settlement, we don't mind going to the courthouse steps.
If you think about it, it's kind of unfortunate, but it's something I told people, and I've had this mantra since I was a defense lawyer, because I did defense work for 13 years before I came over to Perry & Young, and I've been a plaintiff's lawyer for almost 12 years now, right? I've always said the same thing. If insurance companies did the right thing, we'd be out of a job.
We'd be selling cars or something, doing something different.
Golly, I can't imagine doing that.
But, so you fight the insurance company, but, Les, we're equipped to do this because we have had cases throughout our 20 years of practicing that you're always fighting the insurance company, but it makes it even tougher now because you have to communicate that to the people that are really, really, really struggling, and the ones that are the actual ones that are having a problem. And you're trying to explain to them what you can and what you can't recover. You're trying to explain to them how the lawsuits work. You're also trying to explain, hey, this is not going to be over and shut real quickly. This is going to go on for a little while.
Right. Well, one of the things with the change in the insurance law that really was not affected, and this is one of the first things we typically talk about when people do get involved in an automobile accident, they actually have a benefit under their own policy called personal injury protection. PIP is what is the abbreviation. We call it PIP. You might have heard the phrase no fault. Florida's a no fault state. Well, all that really means is that if you're involved in an accident, whether it's your fault or somebody else's fault, or let's say it's nobody's fault. Let's say a deer ran out in front of you and you hit it broadside and your airbag's deployed and you got hurt. You have a benefit on your own insurance policy that will provide up to $10,000 for your medical care, or it can also provide up to $10,000 for lost wages. Now, it doesn't pay 100% of those things. It pays 80% of any medical expenses, or it pays 60% of any wages, up to $10,000. But guess what? A couple years ago, even though you pay a premium for that PIP insurance, and it's one of the mandatory coverages that you have to have in the state of Florida, PIP and property damage liability. We can get in that next. But you pay a premium for that PIP insurance. But guess what? A couple years ago, the legislature decided, well, you got a time limit. If you don't get to the doctor, and not a chiropractor,
And not a nurse.
and not a nurse, you got to get to a doctor within 14 days
Of the date of the accident.
of the day of the wreck, or you don't get any PIP benefit, even though you've paid your premium for that.
Yeah.
Or if you do go to the doctor and they say, well, we don't think it's that big of a deal, maybe it's kind of minor, and you think, well, I'm still hurting, but you know, I went, but I don't really have what they consider an emergency medical condition, which is not a medical term, that is a legal legislative
Right.
term. They cut those benefits from $10,000 down to $2,500. So you're paying a premium for $10,000 of medical coverage, but again, sell it on the big print,
Pay out on the small
pay
print.
out on the small print.
And it's the small language that are loopholes that you can get you in trouble. And
Right.
so we always tell everybody that comes to us, let's just say a friend comes to us and said, hey man, you know, do I really want to bother you guys with getting involved in this? We're like, absolutely, because you're going to do more damage to your case thinking that you're doing something really well than having, you know, somebody that actually knows what they're doing and does this every day. So if you have any questions, you know, like our law firm, we do free consultations on injury cases. If you got questions, call us. You know, set an appointment. We've got a lot of lawyers that work for us. There's always opportunity to get on someone's calendar to get your question answered or get a phone call back or an email back. And, you know, you really can get yourself in a box thinking that you can do it by yourself. Oh, it's not that bad. You know, the insurance company's playing along. Well, they're playing along until they really have to pay you some money. And Les, I believe we actually have a statistic somewhere that we've read. I don't know if it was in a Florida legal journal, but basically said by hiring an attorney, the average is basically you get 3 times more of a settlement by hiring an attorney had you done it by yourself.
Actually, I think the study showed it was 3 to 5 times.
Okay, there you
more.
go.
And it was an insurance industry study that was put out that basically said that people that have attorney representing them in their claims as opposed to people who represent themselves, the attorney represented claims end up garnering 3 to 5 times more in a recovery than the individual does. Now, the individual may get something wrapped up quickly, but again, I go back to that PIP insurance example. It's only paying 80% of your bill. I cannot tell you how many times I've had people come into my office and they've only been to the hospital and they had a few scans done, but they had to go by ambulance. They realized, oh, I got a bill from the ambulance, I got a bill from the ER physician.
I didn't even see those people.
I got a bill from the radiologist, I got a bill from the hospital, I got 4 bills, and they have no idea what it is, and lo and behold, their PIP benefits used up.
Gone.
And that 20% that PIP hadn't covered is more than the $1,500 or $2,000 that the insurance company adjuster threw at them 2 days after the
Or
wreck.
showed up at their house or showed up in the hospital to give them, to take care of them and get them to
oh,
sign
we
this
want to
document.
take care of you. Here's $2,500, and then 30 days later, they'll, oh, I got $5,000 in out of pockets because my PIP didn't only covered 80%. And I hate having those conversations with people, but you know, sometimes unfortunately we have to have them, and I would rather not have those.
And that's why we do the show and educate our audience.
Right.
We're going to go to our first break of the evening. Phone lines are open, 850-392-1544. We also you can email us at lawcall@wmbb.com. We have an email question coming up when we come back from the break. See you in a moment. Hey, welcome back to Law Call. We're taking your questions live. Give us a call, 850-392-1544, or you can always email us your question at lawcall@wmbb.com. We actually have an email question that came in right before we took our last break. I have an investment property. My neighbor's garage was on fire and burned down. My garage has been damaged from that. The fire department established that the fire started at the site. His insurance inspector was not interested in ours. We both have the same insurance company, and my damage is about $5,000, and my deductible is $5,000. Do I have to pay this? And I'm going to ask that, I'm going to go a little bit further, and I'm sure Mike's going to be, why do I have to pay this, Les?
Right. Well, you know, an insurance policy is a contract, okay? And like most homeowners policies, there are deductibles, and a deductible is an amount of money that you agree to pay up front before any insurance money is paid. Deductibles can range. If you looked at, if you had a hurricane claim after Hurricane Michael, you probably either had a set dollar amount or you had a percentage of your dwelling coverage. Usually it's anywhere from 1 to 3. I've seen them as high as 10%. So if you had a $150,000 home and a 3%, gosh, I got to do math now. What's that? $4,500 bucks?
Come on, man.
I think, is that right?
Man. Come on, man. I know
That's
it's
right.
late. Yeah.
$4,500 bucks.
It's late.
There's a reason I'm a lawyer. Okay. So you'd have $4,500 deductible if it was a hurricane claim if you had a 3% deductible on a $150,000 dwelling. All right. So in this case, you've got a $5,000 deductible. Now, if your damages are $5,000 and your deductible is $5,000, by contract, you have to pay that money because that is the amount of money that you agreed, that you contracted with the insurance company to pay for that. Now, one thing I would caution you about before you just go and say, oh, shucks, I got to go pay this money, you're entitled to have your own independent person come out there and take a look at it. You know, the adjuster that was hired to go investigate the loss for your neighbor, he's from the same company that it also insures you. So, you know, they know they're going to be responsible for it, but you're still entitled to have your own, you know, have an attorney go out there and look at it. We've worked with people, we've worked with fire inspectors. We know people that, I've got a buddy of mine who's a retired fire marshal over in Tallahassee that I've had some fire cases that we say, hey man, go out and take a look at this and tell me what you think. You know, sometimes the damage is limited to within your deductible, but sometimes there's other damages that you might not realize are there without a thorough inspection. So before you just bite the bullet and pay for the damages yourself, have somebody take a look at it for you. You might end up, you know, getting some money back.
Well, that's the other thing is, don't forget, you have a claim against the person's homeowner's policy, your neighbor's policy that was right next to you. So you may only be out this money in the short term.
Right, if you're running it through your own policy.
If you're only running it through your own policy.
Right, yeah.
Moral of the story is it can get very complicated, and you start trying to find all these experts to go out and not represent you, but I guess stand up for you like an adjuster would, not really an attorney, and give you a professional opinion about what your damages actually are. You're going to actually have to pay them as well.
Yeah, I should have been more clear about that. If you're filing it under your own policy, you have that deductible. But if you're filing it under your neighbor's policy against them,
You're making a claim against
you're making a claim. You're making a claim against your neighbor. So you know you have to figure that out. Sometimes that might be a good idea or a bad idea. We just don't know. I mean, it's
$5,000, $5,000.
I know. That's right. That's right. So,
but you would think the neighbor would understand as well.
But if you're going against somebody else, you don't. Even though it's the same company, you still are not bound by that deductible when you're making a claim against somebody else's policy.
We're going to jump into some more property questions in just a moment, but we do have another email question that just came to us. Is there a time limit to use the PIP? My motor vehicle accident occurred in May of 2019, and I never claimed lost wages. Dolores, that is an awesome question. Les, you touched on that earlier in the show.
Right. So the only time limits that I'm aware of by statute are the initial time limits that are imposed, that 14-day time period where you must seek medical treatment in order to preserve your PIP benefits. Now, if you still have PIP benefits remaining, if your wage loss is due to the injuries that you sustained, if you have documentation, you can always submit that to the PIP insurance. Now, the only other issue with it is we talked about statutes of limitations. There is a 5-year statute of limitation for making a claim, a first-party insurance claim. So if you're using your own policy.
Explain that, what a first-party claim is.
Yeah, so first-party is I'm making a claim against my own insurance company. The most common one we see in an automobile accident scenario is uninsured motorist coverage. PIP insurance, of course, but also uninsured motorist coverage, which, you know, we talk about that on the show all the time. You're more likely than not, if you're involved in a wreck, you're going to get hit by somebody that doesn't have insurance or doesn't have enough insurance. And that's because Florida is I think the only state in the United States that does not require drivers to have bodily injury liability coverage, which is that coverage that if they cause a wreck, their insurance will pay you for your injuries. Florida doesn't have that coverage. They're only required to have the PIP and the property damage liability, which is coverage to fix your vehicle if somebody hits you. So chances are, you know, people that talk about, oh, I got full coverage, chances are they got the minimal coverage and they don't have bodily injury liability. So uninsured motorist coverage is insurance that you buy to step in the shoes of that person that does not have insurance to compensate you for medical bills, pain and suffering, lost wages, future medical, things like that. If you file a first party claim, you have 5 years in the state of Florida to do that because it's based on a contract. Right. So this is where it starts to get a little confusing. You know, we start talking about these legal claims. A negligence injury claim is 2 years now in the state of Florida, but that same negligence injury claim against your own insurance company, if there is no insurance, is 5 years. 5 years.
So general rule of thumb, if you're suing or making a claim against your own insurance company,
go by 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the
shortest.
Well, those are considered first-party claims, right?
Right.
Now, going back to Dolores's question, you know, you have to be concerned whether or not she even qualifies for the full $10,000 if she had not been treated by a doctor in 14 days. So you got to get through that hurdle first and get through that. And then Dolores, assuming that you did, and if you do have any PIP available left on your policy, well, by all means, make your claim for lost wages and submit it to them. Once again, you're dealing with trained professionals on the other side. Hire an attorney, help you out, advocate for you, because trust me, whether it's an adjuster for an insurance company or whether it's an attorney for an insurance company, they are actually advocating on behalf of the insurance company. So you might as well have someone working for you, right, Les?
Yep.
We're going to take our last break of the night. We have some more email questions to get when we come back. Phone lines are still open, 850-392-1544. Back to you in a moment. Hey, welcome back to our third segment of Law Call tonight. We're going to jump right back into it, Les. We've got a couple email questions we're going to try to get to before we end the show tonight. From Jeffrey, what happens if you are injured by another driver and the other driver's insurance refuses to pay even if you have an attorney? Well, go ahead.
But I mean, I think that there's a couple of options at that point. I mean, there may be a reason that the insurance company is refusing to pay. It could be that they haven't received documentation showing what your injuries and your claim are. It might be that it's incomplete. It might be sometimes people are still treating. And they don't have a full diagnosis, and the insurance company is saying, well, we're not going to offer anything until we really know. So it depends, but it's
sometimes you can have a miscommunication between your attorney, no matter who they are, and the client. But I think Les, probably the first thing that I would recommend would be go sit down with your attorney and understand why the insurance company is not paying for the multitude of reasons that you just stated. And then get on the same page with your attorney. If you can't get on the same page with your attorney, well, then you may have to seek other counsel somewhere else. But by all means, sit down with the person that's representing you currently. Find out what the problem is, and maybe there's just a lack of communication. And it could resolve those problems. We have one more email question for the evening. Can you still file on your insurance if you catch COVID? From Steve. So Steve, I would think that would be not auto-related. That would probably be like a healthcare policy.
It sounds like if you have COVID-related illnesses, if you have a health policy that provides coverage, you should be able to seek benefits under that policy pursuant to whatever the written terms are.
The theme of the show is obviously fighting the insurance company, and we stated it during our first segment that it's getting more difficult to fight the insurance company, especially doing it alone. And you definitely need seasoned attorneys to represent you. And I would highly encourage anyone who finds himself in a situation to where they're fighting an insurance company, whether it's an auto accident, whether it's a medical malpractice issue, slip and fall, or whatever the situation may be, find an attorney to represent you. Our law firm does free consultations, Les. We're happy to meet with anybody and don't charge them anything to discuss their case.
That's right. And it's easy for us because we do it all the time, but it's complicated. I mean, you're typically dealing with anywhere from 4 to 5 different types of coverages, usually 2 or 3 different insurance companies. There's policies, there's terms and conditions. So it's a minefield out there if you're not careful.
I've been doing it 20 years, and my man here has been doing it how long?
25 years.
25. So, there's a lot to it.
I can't believe Chris got held back that many times.
I know, man. I tried my darndest, though. But, hey, what do you say? It's time for the last segment, shout-outs. We got some people waiting and watching the show to see if we're going to give them a shout-out. So, Les, I'm going to let you go ahead. We got 1 minute left before we have to.
I want to give a shout-out to Kathy Mitchell up in Chipley, Northwest Florida Community Hospital. She had a birthday on Friday. Happy birthday, Kathy. Saw her out at Gulf Coast Jam this past weekend. We had a good time. Pam Myers, I love you, ma'am. Thank you for always watching. I said ma'am, not man.
Hurry up.
My mom and dad, Jen, Rachel, Eli, my kids, Aunt Ann up in Abbeville, Nick and Lauren, and Rick from the Marlin, my man.
And Miss Pam, I love you too, sugar. Ashley, my mom's watching. Miss Judy Smith. Trace from the 32444 zip code's watching tonight.
Nice.
Gary, the Buck, all of our guys and friends out at Gulf Coast Jam. Thank you, guys. It was a great festival. And Mark, Randy, and Dave, just excellent job again, guys. Ted is watching, and Timmy R. from Chipley. He's watching tonight.
Timmy R. You got to watch out for that guy.
You got to watch that guy.
Especially if you live in a tiny yard.
Yes, you do. Anyways, guys, thank y'all for tuning in tonight. Thank you for all the email questions. Same time, same place next week. I'm not sure if it'll be me or Les, but it'll be one of us or somebody.
Won't be me. I'll be fishing.
Be somebody. But anyways, thank you for joining in, and see you next week.
Good night.